All right. Hi, everyone. Today, Mobeen and myself, we have the pleasure of having Roland with us as our guest. So this is a conversation that is co-hosted by Wharton and INSEAD, and we will cover a lot of interesting topics. So stay tuned with us. Why don't we go ahead and Mobeen, let's introduce yourself shortly. I'll introduce myself, and then we dive into the interesting questions that we have planned for today's conversation.
For sure. Thank you so much, Ambreen, for giving the basic intro. I'm Mobeen. I'm an MBA candidate in INSEAD, and I recently took over the leadership of Investment Banking Club at INSEAD along with one other co-president. And I'm very privileged and happy to be here with Roland Phillips to have this conversation.
Fantastic. So, a little bit about me. I have just graduated from Wharton and very excited for starting my career in investment banking. There's definitely going to be a long ride, and I'm super excited for that. Now, let's hear from you, Roland. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm good. Congratulations on getting into investment banking as well.
Fantastic. So we're definitely going to touch on a lot of topics around your career, your views on investment banking recruitment. But before we jump into that, you have worked in both London and New York. Which one do you prefer?
You know, I love big cities. I grew up in fairly small places, but I was lucky to start my career in New York City. And I think in total I've worked in New York for maybe 11 or 12 years and in London for about 16. So I'm somebody who loves diversity and diversity of experience. So I think working in both is great. I have a family, so actually living in London with children is actually easier than living in New York City. And so that's one of the reasons that I've stayed in London. But I think my view is anybody who has the opportunity to work in both places really should work in both places because you get that breadth and diversity of experience that I mentioned before.
Fantastic. I love that and could not agree more. Now we have some rapid fire style questions and we'll be over to you.
For sure, for sure. So, first thing we would love to know is like you have had experience in multiple companies. So we are curious to know why did you join PJT, and then what keeps you in PJT
Yeah, absolutely.
like for so long?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually started my career at a firm called Dillon Reed, which was a at the time independent firm, and that's where I went out of undergraduate university. And I wanted to go there because it was a small firm, and I wanted to get the experience of working closely with clients, which I think is what's so important about what we do. And I think when I left undergrad, the appeal of banking and the appeal of Dillon Reed was I wanted to have the opportunity to see CEOs, CFOs sit in boardrooms, and I thought working in a firm that size was the best way to do it. Interestingly, I worked at Dillon Reed. It was acquired by Swiss Bancorp, which then merged with UBS. So within a year, I had gone from working in an independent firm to working at a 60,000 person European bank. And it was not by choice, but it was interesting to see the M&A process from the inside, which probably had a benefit to me as I've done my job over the years and understanding what synergies are and the dislocation associated with employees at big companies. So that's how I ended up at UBS. It wasn't actually because I wanted to work at the time at a massive international bank, but it was a great experience. And I think I worked at UBS and I had great mentorship there. In UBS, I had the opportunity to work in New York first, and then I went to London, and then I went back to New York, and that's where I got promoted to managing director, and then went back to London and was promoted to a group head. So I had a tremendous opportunity with great people who I worked with. It kind of felt like I got everything out of working at a big bank that I wanted. And in 2012, I left UBS to go to a firm called Centerview. And Centerview was where my mentor, who I'd worked at UBS with, he set it up. So I kind of felt like I had done everything that I needed to do at a big bank and gotten promoted as far as I wanted to be. And I wanted to get back to the purity of client coverage, strategic advice, and kind of like pure M&A. And I think that's what you get at a firm like Centerview. And I was at Centerview for 10 years, which was a terrific time. I grew a lot personally. And then in 2022, the end of 2022, I resigned from Centerview to come to PJT. And I've been here for just about a year. I had a long gardening leave between jobs, but I think just for me, PJT has a slightly different style, a highly collaborative approach. I got to know the people here very well, and it's a terrific platform. Trying to build a slightly more global platform to operate in, and so that's why I'm here. And it's been terrific. But yeah, I'm just coming up on my 1 year anniversary, so still early days.
Very nice to learn that. Very, very interesting. And the next curiosity is, naturally, with someone of this experience, what could you want in the next 5 to 10 years for yourself in terms of your, let's say, career growth or like aims that you want to achieve? So we would love to know a bit more about that.
I'll tell you, I think what doesn't change is intellectual curiosity. And, it's kind of maybe easier to find the younger you are, but I think something that's really great about investment banking and, the career path that I was fortunate to go on is it's an incredibly steep learning curve, and it's always steep. And you have colleagues and clients who are constantly pushing you. So, for me, I want to make sure that there continues to be a steep learning curve, and I'm doing more and seeing different people and experiencing different things. I mean, I love what I do. I'm very, very fortunate. I started as a first year analyst. The hours were as brutal as everybody says they are. The style of work can be difficult, but I really enjoyed it. The camaraderie is excellent. The client process is excellent. So I've really loved it from when I started, and continue to love it today. So I think that's the most important thing. You got to continue to challenge yourself. I mean, in life, maybe you've got to take some outside influences as well. And the more time you have, the more you can do that. But yeah, I mean, I think in 5 years' time, I hopefully will be continuing to do the similar things that I'm doing today.
Perfect. So one fun question we want to ask you is like, if you could buy a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say, and where do you think it could be?
Well, first off, I definitely wouldn't buy a billboard. Probably not my style. I'm a fairly discreet person. So, but one of my outside interests, I own a brand of gin. So if someone was going to give me a billboard, then I'd want it in Times Square, and I would dedicate it to that business.
Perfect, perfect, very nice. Ambreen, you want to take over the career path?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mobeen. And Roland, congratulations for the first year anniversary coming up with PJT. We're going to have some conversations and deep dive into the career overview now, and we have some questions planned. But let's start with, so I am 29 now. What were you doing when you were 29?
Banking. I started, I think I was 22 years old. So when I was 29, I was probably a VP or senior vice president, I think. Like I said, I started in New York and I moved to London and I went back to New York. Interestingly, I didn't go to business school. I have a brother who went to HBS. So rivals of you guys, but I was at the time I was really enjoying what I was doing, and I think for me, moving abroad, I have British parents, I should say also, but living abroad was an opportunity for me to get a differentiated perspective on what I was doing. I was working in banking I was really happy with what I was doing. So the temptation, or the interest in going to business school was there, but equally, I was happy and I didn't want to step out of what I was doing, and I had confidence that I would continue to enjoy it. So when I was 29, I was, I think, 7 years into it, and going full steam ahead, trying to get promoted to managing director.
That's fantastic. And I can completely agree with your experience of moving abroad, because that just gives you a very, very different level of exposure. So, Roland, you graduated 3 years before 2000's financial crisis. And I'm sure that was stressful, right? But how did you navigate being in a recessionary environment this early in your career?
That's a great question. I think you do this job long enough and you see peaks and troughs. So I think when I started in '97, it was a very good economic environment. Banks had gone through a period, kind of the first period of consolidation based on, and this is in the U.S., U.S. laws around investment banks and commercial banks being able to combine. So it was, a period of enormous growth in the financial services industry. And I was, so I probably, I saw that, and that led to growth in M&A markets and companies getting bigger, a lot of what's driven economic growth since then. So it was really 2000 was .com issues. And I've covered my entire career, I've covered consumer companies, so slightly insulated from that. But, it was the first time of seeing real craziness of, toothpaste.com being a billion-dollar company or whatever it is. And it felt irrational. And, but the interesting thing is when you're that young, risk isn't such a big deal because I didn't have kids. I was early in my career. I hadn't invested so heavily into it. So I wanted to make sure I continued to do a good job. I wanted to make sure that I continued to be employed, had the optionality that was important, but it wasn't, it was, really in the financial crisis in 2006, 7, 8, and to 2009 that my worldview changed. And, it was extraordinary to work at a 60,000 person company that was so close to bankruptcy, and, what happened to Lehman and Merrill. Yeah. I was a young MD at that point. I had 3 children. And at that, juncture, you're like, God, if there's a problem now, that is problematic. And, you get paid in stock, and the stock, it gone down substantially in value. So, I think that was a very important point in my life to understand that you've got to have balance in your life. Major problems can occur in your career. And I think I had worked really hard up to that point, and I was, super career focused. I think that was a period of time that was, remains with me and a lot of other people, that, these big companies that we thought were so secure, you can run into risk, and you can not get paid, and you can get, fired, and, lose your job from one day to the next. And I think, that for anybody who worked in finance at that time, it had a pretty profound impact on us.
Again, I'm going to take the next one, Mobeen, and we can do alternate after this one.
Okay.
Okay, so you have worked at UBS, as you've shared, PJT Partners, and now PJT. So what influenced these decisions? And I think for someone who's entering in this career, right, just out of curiosity, when do you decide that, okay, it's the time to now move on to the next thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, a lot of people in this industry move around a
Yeah.
lot. I've been at one place for 15 years, 10 years, and, hopefully I'll be at PJT for a long time. I think you've got to be patient in this job.
Mhm.
people do have a tendency to maybe move prematurely. You know, a promotion is given and they jump at it. I think you want to, you've got to really actively work your career. And you want, you know, first off, you have to surround yourself with good people who are going to teach you a lot, and then, you know, get as much out of those opportunities as you can. And I think, you know, that's kind of what I did at UBS. I was there for a long time, worked with terrific people, learned a lot. And like I said, just for me at that time, I felt that my interest, I wanted to get back into the more pure world of advisory. And, you know, big banks ask their employees to do a lot of things. You know, it's M&A, maybe FX, leverage finance, all things which are great. But, you know, for me, I wanted to get back to covering clients exclusively. And that's what Centerview gave me the opportunity to do. Then when I came to PJT, and again, like I said, I was there for 10 years. It was terrific. Coming to PJT, it was the opportunity to build a global team again. And so it was really opportunity driven at a, you know, firm that I felt was growing rapidly, extremely well led, and a, you know, super strong group of bankers. So, you know, I took my time probably with both changes, but I think, you know, the timing felt right also. I mean, I think you really want to be sure when you make a change, because like I said, you don't actually get that many of them. You know, some people are, you know, like career traders. I don't think career trading is the reputation that you want to have. So you don't get many shots at moving. So you just got to make sure you're making them at the right time for the right reasons. You know, it shouldn't be for money. It shouldn't just be for promotion. You've got to analyze these things over a longer period of time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then basically banking is all about deals. And talking about the famous stories, RJ or Nabisco is the most famous ones. So do you have some stories like that in your career, maybe similar, that basically got so much heat within the company or maybe outside?
No deals, I think, are as good as that one. I mean, that's old fashioned, and, you know, for anybody who's interested in banking, it's a deal they need to understand, and it's a book they need to read. So, you know, that's a coming of age story of, you know, M&A advisory. But,
Yeah.
you know, for me, it's the business is about deals in a way. The business is really about clients. And I have had an incredible good fortune of working with amazing companies like, you know, Diageo and Reckitt and big companies like that, and doing deals that are really important for them. You know, I advised Diageo when they bought Casamigos. You know, for me, that's a great deal because I have many friends who don't work in banking or finance and have no idea what I do for a living. So fortunately, they all know Diageo and they all know Casamigos. So it is instantaneously a way for me to explain what I do. So and you know, the personalities of obviously George Clooney and Randy Gerber, and I advised Diageo when they bought Aviation Gin. So Ryan Reynolds, you know, those are interesting, and it's, you know, that's it's kind of like a moment in time of how celebrities had built brands, and, you know, I had kind of a front row seat to that, which is terrific. And then, you know, the great thing of working with clients more than just on deals is you see the evolution of these businesses and brands within these companies. So, you know, I've to this day continue to follow it. And so, yeah, I think I've had the good fortune of working with really rewarding clients. And that's what's made the job so enjoyable.
Perfect, perfect. One follow up on this, I would love to know from you is like in UBS, in Centerview and PJT. I think they differ in their expertise area, and probably there is difference of expertise from the manager side as well that you need. So if you can share a bit about that difference, and like one very important thing is that in PJT report, we read that it grew 20% in this previous year. So what made that possible? Like it's not an easy environment to operate in, and growing 20%, I think is a great achievement.
Yes, thank you very much. I think first off, it's, the skill sets, like it does go back. I always thought when we hire people that you have to adjust to a few things. I mean, you have to adjust to the type of work that we do, and we hire intelligent people, so people can figure that out. You have to adjust to the hours. I mean, this is intensive, as I said, and I don't think anyone should go into banking with any views that they can change how that occurs, or maybe it's not actually real, because it is real. People work late and they work weekends, and that's kind of like a binary adjustment. Most people can adjust to it and some can't. The other challenge is adjusting to the people who you work with and how you interact with them, and that can be challenging, because like any high pressure environment, it can be tough. I mean, I don't think there's any excuse for people who are polite and caring, but people are also demanding, and you can be polite and demanding, and that can be a very difficult adjustment. It's you guys go to terrific business schools, terrific schools before that, and excelled at every level. This is a place when in this, if you go to great consulting firm or other areas, you get ranked very aggressively versus your peers, and that can be brutal for people who have excelled their entire career. It's kind of like making it to the NBA in basketball. It's like all of a sudden you be the top of your team, and now there are a lot of mediocre players out there. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're at UBS, Centerview, or PJT, you need to be prepared to manage that. And within that, the intellectual curiosity is critical, because it's in how you engage with people is what's going to dictate your level of success. I mean, you cannot be a shrinking violet and think that you're going to be noticed and people are going to think you do a great job. You've really got to figure out how to interact with people and excel at interacting with people. And that's what you're in a competitive environment. You just got to figure out how you do that. So that's, I think, the first half of the question. The other half is I think this is a good market for firms like PJT and Centerview as well. I think, I was telling somebody earlier today, this is a good market for what I'd call line fishing as opposed to fishing with a net. I think big banks go and fish with a net. I think we line fish. We're very client centric, and we don't need to do a lot of deals, to be successful. Now, PJT specifically, we've got the best restructuring business in the world. I mean, hands down. And so that diversification is certainly helpful, of having a great strategic advisory business, which is being built strong and getting stronger. And then on the other side, the preeminent restructuring business. I mean, without question, the number one restructuring business in the world. So, that's been a great balance in this market that other firms don't have.
Very nice, very nice. Ambreen, you can take the next one.
Yes. So, Roland, I think you've already touched on a little bit about the market and what's happening, right? So we would love to know a little bit more about the IB market generally. So in 2023 and 2024, every major bank in US and Europe went through layoffs, right? So apart from the macroeconomic conditions, what do you think is driving this wave of layoffs?
Listen, I think during the financial or COVID, it was a funny time during COVID, because there, initial panic then led to, a lot of deals. That's as stimulus comes through, and it was an opportunity for companies to do things. And banks staffed up in that period of time. So I think what we're seeing a little bit now is, first off, clearly a softer deal environment that's existed for the past couple of years, and continues to be soft. and then the over hiring that occurred during, kind of around COVID. So I think it's those two things. I think, this is a funny industry where it's not seasonal workers, but, it's kind of cyclical workers where, big banks in particular can staff up massively and then they just contract when they need to. And so I think, it's not necessarily a great attribute of the industry right now, but certainly something, like I said, that I think big banks much more than independent firms do, because I think independent firms are always much more bottom line focused and probably conservative. So I think that's one of the dynamics there. I mean, I think hope springs eternal with bankers, probably like politicians, that it's good news is just around the corner. And I think people have been thinking that good news is just around the corner and, rates are going to come down and rates are going to come down fast. And there's just, it's a complicated world that we live in right now. And predictability is tough. So I think the sort of softer market has lasted longer than some people thought. Personally, I'm not surprised by it. And I think it's going to stay soft through 2024. So I think there were elevated levels going into end of last year and this year, and that's where trimming needs to occur. But yeah, then I think as we look into the future, hopefully, inevitably, there's going to be a uptick in M&A and in deals. But it's just right sizing for the market today, I think.
That's fantastic. And if you look at 2025, as you've mentioned, we will hopefully be seeing the deal activity pick up in M&A. But do you think, are there any specific sectors within M&A or any other areas outside of M&A that would see the deal activity pick faster than other areas in the banking space?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly seeing positive movement in equities and leverage finance.
Yeah.
And, I think financial sponsors being very active acquirers and sellers is one of the main missing components right now. Strategic M&A is getting done. The year started with Capital One and Discover. That was like a good old-fashioned M&A deal, done by two independent firms. It was PJT and Centerview. I think that kind of set the tone for the year in some respects. I think, like I said, so, strategic things are happening. I think what is not happening is the level of sponsor activity that, existed, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and, probably 7 years ago. And I think that just takes a much more vibrant leverage finance market. And I think that in, different borrowing costs. And I think that's where the outlook is quite positive, whether it's, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. I think, certainly the direction of travel is positive.
It's great to hear that outlook is positive, and definitely, hopefully, I think the deal activity will start to pick up as well. But if we deep dive a little bit on that, right? What do you think, or what do you foresee the differences between, let's say, US and European investment banking space? And are there are there some differences that people who are recruiting or the investors should be aware of much more than before?
Good question. There are a lot of elections happening in the world, and that has an impact. I think, there's a lot that is said and known about the US. And, probably if it's Biden or Trump, it probably doesn't lead to a lot of market dislocation because, Trump might be slightly more business friendly in, Biden's the known quantity, but in a way, they're both known quantities. You look at what's happening in elections across Europe, what's happening in France right now, these are potentially destabilizing events. And on a probably softer economic foundation than exists in the US. And I think, that's a natural concern. I think, the US is such a big M&A market. It is a single M&A market. And so because of that, there are more deals, more activity. So I do, certainly have some concerns about elections in Europe and what that might mean for decision making and the economies of these countries.
These are
I say
definitely
that I
some
live in
big.
Europe, so I hope it's
Yeah.
going to be fine.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it works well for both US and Europe. And I think fantastic advice and fantastic insight for sure. So, Mobeen, why don't you take the next section on the recruitment now?
Yeah, so very, very interesting question for probably the audience who wants to recruit into investment banking. So we hear a lot from alumni and the people who got into investment banking that it's all about networking. So, and I think that's a very subjective phrase. People understand it differently. So, what would you say to especially people who are now joining MBA programs and who are into their programs? How important is networking and what does it mean actually to network?
I think, networking, it's almost like a truism. Networking is really important. So I think it's probably a little bit more nuanced than that. I think the key is tenacity, like anything that we do. I mean, you need to be tenacious in your pursuit of the objective. And you need to have cut through as a person. You've got to be a good networker. There are a lot of people who network who you kind of wish they were not networking because you don't want to like spend that much time with them. But it's the figure out what your pitch is in 5 minutes. And this is no different from how you market a brand. Probably I'm not a big Instagram user or TikTok user, but how do you get resonance with an audience in an incredibly short period of time? I mean, everybody, I mean, obviously well documented, our attention spans are, micro, we're all gnats flying around right now. So networking is one thing, but how do you get cut through in a short period of time and relate to people and engage with people? I think that's really the key. I mean, you can go to as many cocktail receptions as you want to, but have a plan, figure out who you've got to talk to, how you're going to talk to them, and then what the follow-up is. I mean, that's the sort of magic sauce, I think. It's kind of like and you see it in all walks of life. People just hang out at like a cocktail reception.
Yeah.
I don't personally, I don't like that. I just would rather say, okay, here are the 5 people who are here who I got to go see, and boom, 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 and see them do the thing, and then probably take off. I think that's figure out what you want, who you've got to get it from, and then how you do it. I think that's really what matters. But it is the tenacity. It is sending cold emails. There are cold emails and there are cold emails. I mean, there are some people who send them that create engagements, and there are other people who it's clear this is an email that's being sent to 1,000, maybe genuinely 250 other people. It's like,
Yeah.
take the time to understand who you're sending something to. That takes a lot more effort, but do it. And then don't ask for a lot of people's time, because we are all, as you guys are, I mean, everybody's time poor. And that's the most, simply the most valuable thing that any of us own is our time. And to give it is extremely expensive.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think the key word for people who want to network is to learn how to engage whoever they are networking with. And to do that, they need to have all those factors in their mind. And one more question I want to ask you is, you hire both analysts and associates in PJT. So from a top level perspective, what sets them apart, the good candidates from the ones who don't get offers?
That's a good question. Yeah, I tell you, I think it's really important to be well-rounded. This is a people job. we get a lot of CVs. We meet a lot of people, all incredibly talented. But at the end of the day, our job is to engage and relate to people and have empathy. And I think people who have, for me, like what people do outside of the office, is as important as what they do in the office. It's like, when someone gets to me, I assume they're probably, they check a lot of boxes. And so the whole package, and I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before. I mean, I just think in life, you've got to make sure that you've got a breadth of interests. And that's kind of where I was going with the financial crisis. It's like all of a sudden you realize, wow, there's problems for me professionally. If you don't have something else in your life to fall back on, I mean, that's when you can run into real problems. And so again, I think I think it's really important that people are well-rounded. It's what do people do? What do you do on the weekend? That's a really important question for me to ask people. And when people are like, well, I like to read the FT and textbooks on finance, I'm like, this person's probably not the perfect candidate for me. That might be a perfect candidate for someone else, but somebody who enjoys going out with friends and skis, goes rock climbing, whatever it is. It's like, I have kids, and it's what I tell them. I'm like, guys, have a couple of things that you're really deeply interested in, because I think it's the same thing that probably gets people into good universities and good business schools is commitment. And that's the other thing. You're really deeply interested in, Greek antiquities. Like, you're probably a committed person, and that's a powerful element of a CV and a discussion that you have with somebody. So it's like, really value hobbies, and take them seriously. It's like, particularly, it's with youth, it's the ability to really commit to things outside of what we do professionally and get really good at them. I think that's a wonderful thing. And then that's an experience that you get to share with all of your colleagues, which is beneficial to them also. We're communities. Community is really important when we hire people.
Perfect. So one follow-up question I want to ask on this is, you get resumes, let's say, from top 10 business schools. In terms of technical expertise, more or less, those candidates are kind of equally good, not very much far apart from each other. And then after that evaluation, you check about these other factors, their like other interests, maybe their communication skills, their past mix of experience that adds to the transferable skills that IB has. So can you share a bit more on that part?
Yeah, I think firms do numeric tests, and I think that's a good way of just taking big numbers and making them slightly smaller. Maybe it's not always. I don't know if I'd be here if I had a numeric test, but when I was interviewing, I think that it does get back to how you can engage with people. That's the art of the interview. You got to get good at interviewing, and I do think that's a skill. And you, again, don't have a lot of time to make a big impact. I mean, try to read the person who you're with, so that you can make the interview more of a conversation. I think if it's a one-way street of someone's just peppering questions, and you're just answering them, that's probably not great. I mean, it's gotta, like everything in life, a conversation is the way to do it. When we present to companies, we want to make it a conversation. If it's just us presenting, I mean, that's not a great engagement. So questions, it's people think that you asking me a question is like that's just how the interview ends, and actually have really thoughtful questions and, try to get into those questions. Don't wait until the end. Get into it while you're going through the meetings. By the way, I do think it's like the last thing I would say on that is the great thing about this job is this is an apprenticeship. And this is one of the last apprenticeships on the planet. And that you go to Wharton or INSEAD and other great business schools, you need to be sort of vocationally experienced with what we do with financial analysis. Like you should know what a DCF is. And I think business schools and undergraduate business schools have gotten very good at training how we do things.
Yeah.
However, we train people. Like we want raw people because then we're going to train them the way that we want to train them. And that's where that apprenticeship really matters. It's like we really enjoy training people and making them better. And so I think that's people are like, I know how to do all financial analysis. I'm great from day one. It's plug and play. It's like, I don't think I want to work with that person. I want to work with the person who's like, I have a good foundation and I'm here to learn. I'm here to, dedicate my life to this and learn because I want to be a great banker. I think, those are the people who are most valuable.
This is fantastic advice, Roland. And the next set of questions, I think we're just very interested to hear your advice for people who are starting out in banking, have graduated, or let's say they're starting their summer internships in the next few weeks, right? So as someone with no or limited finance background, right, it can be very hard to learn the ropes, like going through financial modeling and all of that, right? So as someone who is coming new to this industry, how does one overcome imposter syndrome and feel the sense of belonging?
Probably don't have it is the first piece of advice. And, I think, and that's obviously for some people and sometimes easier said than done, but, it's, I love stoicism. I read a lot about it and you realize, perspective is everything in life. That coming to something without a finance background or, as deep a finance background as some people, maybe is a positive because whoever that person is doesn't have the background. If you're an electrical engineer or something like that, they don't have that background. Maybe you worked at a company and they, your peer worked in banking before. Just remember what your competitive edge is and focus on that competitive edge. And that's what I would do. And that's where, perspective really matters. Try not to have imposter syndrome because you're there for a reason. You have been hand selected to be there and you deserve your seat at the table and, be proud of that. And come with this incredibly open mind that, particularly if you're a summer, you're going to, it's so I get excited when our summers come because it's like fresh faces and new experiences. And yeah, if a summer is like, I know everything about financial analysis, you'd be like, oh, I will gravitate to the people who don't, if they're English majors, and you're like, okay, let's figure this out together. You're here, summer internships and, summer associates, summer analyst. It's like, that is a two-way street. And, frankly, even when you're a new analyst, and that's what I tell people, or a new associate, it's a two-way street. It's like, my ask from you is that you give me your time and attention and unwaveringly, by the way. And what you should ask from me is that I train you. I give you very interesting and exciting things to work on and a great infrastructure around you. And that's when it works out. We want to hire, I think banks generally and advisory firms, we want to hire our summers. So we want it to work out. And that's what it is. It's like go in with an open mind and like tremendous positivity. I think that's the thing. It's what you're going to have to adjust to is it's difficult to be positive when it's Saturday night at 10 p.m. and you've blown all of your friends off and you're working on a book for like Monday morning. It's like it's difficult to be positive, but you got to dig deep and be positive. Because positivity attracts positivity.
That's fantastic. And I'm gonna hold on to that. Positivity attracts positivity for sure. So as someone who's worked in banking for this long, Roland, and for people who want to be career banker, right? So what is the secret sauce of keep going? Obviously, I think you need to be good. I think you need to be good at relationship building, and obviously positivity attracts positivity. But what in addition to this would be your advice to someone who wants to stay in banking for long term?
Yeah, I think you need again, perspective really matters. I mean, you cannot get burned out. I mean, you need to have balance in your life. I have two brothers. One works in finance, and the other is a pediatric heart surgeon. I learned pretty early on his bad days were really bad. My bad days were usually just a bit of a pain in the ass, and that perspective served me well. I mean, he deals with really, tough things. I mean, we deal with tough things, but there are just different tough things. And I think keeping that in mind, has always been helpful for me. But, again, it's finding an ability and balance that when you're not working, you're recharging, or, you have good friendships, and like I said, you have good hobbies, you have a good family, you have whatever it is, you travel. So I think all that stuff's important. Like I said, the learning curve is really important, for high performers. If you're not constantly being challenged, you're just going to look for something else. So that's where I was so fortunate from, day one until right now to have great people around me and above me and below me. And so I think I was really fortunate. To some extent, I'm lucky, but, then luck is when preparation meets opportunity. It's like, I believe in that. You do make your own luck. So I think you've got to be pretty unrelenting in making sure you find people who you want to work with. But so that will keep you in the game. But I think all of those are factors. I think, for me, moving around, not firms, but geographically, kind of kept things fresh, which is good. So, I think that all of that goes into it.
That's fantastic. And definitely, Mobeen and I have learned a ton. Before we close the conversation, Roland, is there anything that you would like to ask us?
Yeah.
Well, first off, I really appreciate this, and congratulations to both of you guys on sort of where you're going, and the steps that you're taking. It really is terrific. But probably the question for both of you is, what do you see yourself doing in the next 3 to 5 years? And then I'll ask the question that I ask people who I interview: what do you guys do out of the office, or when you're not studying? So 2 questions each.
Ambreen, you go first, then let me answer.
Okay, fantastic. So I think just to be completely transparent and honest, I think coming out of business school and going into banking, I would be doing tech banking, right? So I do intend to see myself in tech banking, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, because there's just a lot more for me to learn. I can go in deep in all the 3 sectors in tech banking. So that is where I want to continue focusing professionally. I think outside of work, I definitely enjoy speaking to people and learning from people like yourself, and so I make sure that I'm having conversations outside that keep me interesting. One example is I love to speak to startup founders, particularly the immigrant founders in countries like Europe or Pakistan. And I think conversations like that inspire me, and it also keeps me creative outside of the financials and number crunching as well. So that's something that I would definitely continue doing that.
Great.
Yeah, for me, I have had a very, you can say, different experiences in the past. So before coming to INSEAD, my mantra was to experiment a lot and then see where I want to go. Now I believe I have a very strong foundation, but I have realized that finance leads the world in a lot of ways. and in the heart of finance is private equity and investment banking, and there you can say a teamwork. So that's what makes my interest grow in this domain. And the next 3 years at least, I want to learn the tricks of the game, you can say. And then I have an eye for opportunity in the sense how to innovate. So I get inspired by these big, you know, entrepreneurs in the investment banking world and in general, like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, but at the same time, Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink, and people who launched KKR. So in the 3 to 5 or 7 years domain, I want to find something to innovate in the industry.
Yeah.
So that would be, you can say, my goal to achieve in those 5 years while I learn the game as
Amazing. I'll ask one more question. What did you think of the United States beating Pakistan in cricket?
well. we, our team is so unpredictable. It's predictable in unpredictability. So we know you can expect anything. Sometimes they get lost by Scotland, sometimes Afghanistan, and the next game they would beat Australia. So
Yeah.
so we could have
Couldn't
expected it.
resist.
It's a good friendly gift, we would say.
Yeah, exactly.
USA, yeah.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you very much. This is an honor. And yeah, it was lovely talking to you.